we're just discussing. We're not exactly sure where Paul's at, but here he comes. That's a good thing. That's what we like to see. So we'll hold on just a second while he comes in. There he is. Hi, Paul.
Good evening.
So glad you're here tonight. We were getting concerned.
Oh, I am too. It's 8 o'clock, but I just got back from Iowa and I have been rushing to try to get here. And so I'm pleased to get here finally.
Okay.
I'm going to need to go back to Iowa again tomorrow. So,
Okay.
but good. I'm glad to see Laura Hathaway on there, and I'm not sure that's the same face that I had pictured for introduction. So hopefully you got an introduction for her.
Yeah, we do. And
Good.
we are already on recording. So do you want to, do you have a prayer prepared or?
I do have a prayer prepared.
Okay,
However, I think you should proceed with the,
I do the intro first.
yes, you go to the intro first and then, I'll offer the prayer. I think probably I'll do it without the slide share.
Okay,
But thank you for getting, for that, for making the contact, inviting her, and thank you all for your patience with me. Before we begin, let me call to your attention that last week I asked for you to pray for the Barnes family. Abigail was in a very bad car accident last Friday. Her cousin Ozzy was killed in the car wreck. One of her other softball playmates died on Sunday. I didn't realize that when I spoke to you on Monday. And another one died yesterday. And so of the 4 girls, Abigail Barnes is the only one still surviving, and she is in a coma. She has opened her eyes a couple of times, and so there's hope, and there's a worldwide network of people praying for her and for her family. David and I went up to pray for her on last Tuesday, and I think we'll go again tomorrow. But this is a family that has just faced a terrible loss with Shannon's daughter dying in this wreck, and then with 3 girls that were all good friends, 19 years old. Abby is 20 and just about to graduate from Graceland. And this is a very, very difficult time for the family. They're not particularly religious, and yet last night I was pleased to discover that we had Pastor Valentine, who was an Anglican pastor, praying for her. That's an English stalwart. We also had a pastor from Nepal who indicated that he would be praying for her. So just to recognize the worldwide faith expressions that are being put out on the family's behalf is appreciable, but please keep it up because this is a tough one. Oh, and let me also note that we had one of our regular members, Rhoda. What was Rhoda's last name? I got the notice in the email that Rhoda, who used to attend our forum, has passed last Sunday, and so will be joining us from the next session. All right, now then, let's take care of the introductions and proceed with our forum.
okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, so everybody, tonight I'd like to introduce Laura Bracken Hathaway. I became familiar with Laura when I watched a Gospel Tangents episode and Rick Bennett was interviewing her. And so she had such a passion for her Delmarva theory on where the Book of Mormon took place. I I talked to Paul and we decided to get in contact with Laura and ask her if she'd be willing to present to us. And we thought she'd be a good fit, and she graciously accepted our invitation. So she received a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Utah State University in 2002. She then moved to the land of many waters, where she worked in a chemistry lab for 3 years at Cornell University. In 2005, she returned to Utah and got a second Bachelor of Science, this time in horticulture. In 2007, she returned to the lab, where she worked for 5 years in the pharmacology toxicology department at the University of Utah. She currently divides her time studying Book of Mormon geography, raising her 4 children and a husband, and running her own tax firm. So Laura, we welcome you to tonight's Book of Mormon Perspectives, and we'll turn it back over to Paul so he can begin our session with a word of prayer.
Thank you. Let's make sure. Yeah. Thank you, Deb. And thank you, Laura, for coming. Thank all of you for coming. I appreciate that we have the returning numbers of friends who continue to stay with us, and occasionally we get the new people too. And everyone is welcome to the forum. We'll invite Laura to share her perspective. You'll notice that this is the 6th vantage point in which we get to find out where the land of Nephi was. We've had presentations on Peru, on Guatemala, on Georgia, on the Malay Peninsula, the Joseph Smith's Head, and tonight we get the Del Mar vantage point. So this is the 6th attempt to identify geography of the Book of Mormon. And I thank you for that courage to continue to stretch our minds with thinking about ideas that we haven't previously considered. Let us pray. Loving Creator, beyond time and space, whose majestic galaxies show a glimpse of your face, we bow in appreciation that you created us too to participate in fulfilling your purposes, using our agency to embrace what you have called us to do, to commit our lives to virtues like peace, providing open hearts that love in our world increase, to think on a higher level, thinking a few steps ahead, pondering in our hearts, compassionately compiling feelings and reason, seeing that children are fed. This evening, dear Lord, we pray for Laura Townsend, our presenter, that your spirit will sustain, focusing our attention upon the divine center, so that we can embrace the merits of a new look, a possible geographical explanation of our special book. And we ask that our participants make room for understanding, and ideas presented may feel a bit strange and be a bit demanding. But we, as a forum on Zoom, for us a safe place, would look with respect upon revelation of a little bit more of your face. In the name of Jesus, whose image guides, confounds sometimes, and elevates us always. Amen. Okay, Laura, the floor is yours. And if you have PowerPoint to present, then please do.
Okay.
We generally defer to allow you to present until you're done, and then turn loose on all the questions and comments. But if you'd like to make a variation on that, you're welcome to. The floor
I
is
think
yours.
that sounds great. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That was a beautiful, beautiful prayer too. I really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
That land of the Book of Mormon, the Chesapeake Bay model.
Perfect. Yes, so thank you for this invitation to share my perspective. I really appreciate this opportunity. I mean, I've attended 2 of your meetings and I've been so impressed with it. And this time I actually have my video and audio on, so it's a little different, but I'm excited to be here. So why study Book of Mormon geography? The internal consistency suggests that there's a real world setting, that it wasn't just made up by Joseph Smith. And real world setting means real people, people that we can connect with. The reason I got into Book of Mormon geography was because I wanted to improve my comprehension. I was reading the Book of Mormon and wanted to see where these places were. The storylines sometimes get a little confusing and you're wondering who's going where and when. And so I wanted a map and I couldn't find a good map. So I started studying different theories and ended up really focusing on this Chesapeake Bay theory. And so that's where I've spent about 10 years is looking at the details of this theory. So I want to start by acknowledging this statement by the LDS leader. So it was the first presidency in the Quorum of the 12 came out with this statement in 2019. And they felt like they needed to because they were starting to see, especially online on Facebook and different platforms, a contention in the Book of Mormon. And if you think about this, it's one of the major themes of the Book of Mormon is division and how destructive division can be. And so to see division in Book of Mormon geography is really ironic and horrible because the whole message is to unify and not have this division. But I just want to point out that they just said all parties should strive to avoid contention on this matter. They also said they don't know where it took place, so they don't even agree. They have different opinions on it, but they really want us to avoid the contention. And I know in this group in particular, you don't need that lecture because you are open-minded and willing to accept the truth. From what I've seen, it's when we become so narrow-minded that we can't see another side, we miss out on truth. We can't find the truth because we become closed-minded and we miss out on those opportunities to learn from each other. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. My approach has been based on this quote from John E. Clark, and he wrote a paper called A Key for Evaluating Nephite Geographies. And essentially it was an internal map. He just pulled out all the details. He didn't have a real world place in mind, although if you read it, he's definitely biased towards Mesoamerica. But his point was like, any real world theory should reconcile these geographic details. And I just want to read this last line. It says, the Book of Mormon must be the final and most important arbiter in deciding the correctness of a given geography. Otherwise, we'll be forever hostage in the shifting sand of expert opinion. Some people pick one or two things that if the archaeology fits, and then they try to put their geographical models on top of that. But he's saying we need to find the details first and then look at the archaeology. And so that's been my approach, is to reconcile all those little details first. So significant geographic details are going to include a narrow neck of land. I think anyone that has studied geography, that's usually the first place they start, is look at that narrow neck of land. And it's narrow, so it needs to be a reasonable distance across. The distance between cities also need to be reasonable. You can't have really long distances. The land of Zarahemla and the land of Nephi are nearly surrounded by water. There's a mention of a sea that divides the land. And in my model, I'm using sea to imply that there's saltwater and tides. Other models have seas that are lakes or rivers, but as long as they define it. But in my model, it's going to be a saltwater. And then the hills need to be in the right location. There's quite a few hills that are listed, and so we need to have them in the right places. River Sidon, which is the main river in the land of Zarahemla, needs to be a north-south flowing, and it has a head that's close to the sea. And we'll talk about that. I have a slide just specifically for that. And then there's this division of a land northward, which is north of Bountiful, distinct from the land southward. So those are the significant geographic details that we're going to be talking about today. And then we'll also get to some archaeology at the end too. So here's an overview of where we are looking. This is the Delmarva Peninsula. So Washington, D.C. is over here, Baltimore, and then here is Delaware and Maryland underneath it. And then Virginia is this little part right here. So that's where they get the name Delmarva. And what my model is, it's similar to, other people have proposed the Delmarva, but I'm calling this the Delmarva Extended, or even just the Chesapeake Bay model, because I'm including some land over here that the other models have not. So I think I'm the only one that has this particular whole area, and I'll explain why I'm including this as we go along. So like I said, other people have proposed the Delmarva. There was a BYU student in the 1990s who was a nursing student, but he did a English paper where he proposed the Delmarva being the land of the Book of Mormon. And then Franklin Reed, he self-published a book called Finding Zarahemla, and you can find this on Amazon. I think he's on his second edition for that. So here's an idea of why we are looking at this site. So this is from a USGS map. And what we have here, if I go back here, I've labeled this as the fall line. And what this is an elevational change. And what's interesting is the land this is more of a coastal land, and it doesn't have the same plants and animals. The ecology is different here, and the weather is different. And this area is it's warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer versus above this, because we have all the ocean effect, and even more so than just up the coast. This is a unique spot here. But this fall line, it separates this land southward from the land northward. And so this is just a USGS map showing where that line is. Here's another one that says fall line. Am I going too fast? When I get excited, I talk fast. So hopefully I'll slow myself down. Okay, so here's my map. And again, we're just following this fall line over to the other side. This is the Chesapeake Bay, Delmarva Peninsula. And I have the city of Nephi is here. Lehi would land here. And then after Lehi died, Nephi retreated with whoever would come with him up to the land of Nephi. And it had to be a distance of, far enough that he felt safe from his brothers, but not too far where they weren't having wars. Within 2 generations, they were already having conflicts. So I have the city of Nephi up here. Bountiful is going to be up just below the narrow neck. And this line, this 1.5 day journey line, separates Bountiful from Desolation. And then on the other side, we have Zarahemla. I'm going to go back to this map. So if you think I'm going too fast, don't worry. So let's talk about these distances. These first 3 here are from the travels of Alma. Alma was a priest of King Noah. And so he believed Abinadi's words, and he went to the waters of Mormon, and he was baptizing people that believed. And King Noah found out, and so he was coming after him, and the Lord warned him to flee this area. So we have this 8-day journey that's mentioned, and it's from the waters of Mormon to Helam. But with these first 3, what we need to mostly keep in mind is this is with women and children, and they had like their things with them. So this wasn't like a military distance. This is something that they had children. I have children, and my children will admit they can't go that far in one day. And so this is the most important distances that we have to make any geography make sense. It needs to have a reasonable distance from the waters of Mormon to Helam. And the waters of Mormon has to be close enough to Nephi, the city of Nephi, that they were having people come from Nephi to the waters of Mormon back and forth. So 10 to 20 miles tops is what we're talking about, just like a day's journey or 2. And then from there, you go to the Valley of Alma, which is just a 1-day journey. And from there all the way to Zarahemla, which is a 12-day journey. So we're not talking a big distance here. Again, remember there's kids. I know I have kids. I have to keep saying that to you. So so I have the waters of Mormon here. I can go to this one. And it would be an 8 days journey from Helam. These are new maps, and I would actually place this up a little bit higher, and I'll show you later why. But from Helam, it's a 1 day's journey to the Valley of Alma, and then all the way over, and they're led to Zarahemla. And the Lamanite, the King Noah's people are chasing them because they were in Helam for a while, and then they escape and go to Alma, and the Lord immediately tells them to get out of the land. And then they're led. It says they're led to the land of Zarahemla. So this would be your 12 days journey, which is about 100 miles. So this is like a Goldilocks. This is a good distance. It's not too long and not too short. The Delmarva people, they've said Nephi's here and Zarahemla's here, which these are just a little bit too close. This is their Sidon. They don't really have a good the hills by it, and so this is why this area is really important. So I just want to point out where Sidon is. It's this Patuxent River right here is our river Sidon. So Zarahemla is just to the west of Sidon. Okay, so another, like I said, one of the probably first things people think of when they're looking at geography is that narrow neck of land. We have a 1 day's journey that's a defensive military line, and then a 1.5 days journey that says it's on the line, Bountiful and Desolation. So, oops. So again, I have this defensive line that's about 25 miles long, but then the line between Bountiful and Desolation is following that fall line, and it even has line in its name. So it's pretty cool that there's like this distinguishing thing between Bountiful and Desolation. That's a 1.5 day journey. This is about 37 miles is what I usually measure it at. So it's a little over a day, not quite 2 days here for versus this 1 day journey right here. And then, so there's 3 references that are talk about this narrow neck or small neck, and then there's also a narrow pass or passage. And in this model, we're going to distinguish between those two, that a narrow neck and the narrow passage are 2 separate things. And the narrow pass is actually a way into the land northward from the land of Zarahemla. So let me go back to the map. And so you're coming from Zarahemla, if you're going to go into this land northward, which is where the Nephites are establishing themselves, you're going to go up this way, and there's hills and things you're going to run into. So there's a narrow pass right by this fall line that leads you into the land northward. And the textual evidence for that, I have 3 examples here. One is in Ether, and it's talking about the Jaredites. And it says that these poisonous serpents are biting these flock, and the flock are fleeing. I have chase here, but they're actually just fleeing. I couldn't get it all in one line, so it says serpents chase flock. But these flock are fleeing from these poisonous serpents towards the land southward. But what's really interesting, it says, which was called by the Nephites Zarahemla. So most models, they have a narrow neck, and right below that is Bountiful. And Bountiful goes across the narrow neck because they need it to be close to Mulek, which is a city by the East Sea. And so Bountiful is by an East Sea because it's by Mulek. But then it also says that Haggoth had launched his ship into the West Sea near the borders, by Bountiful. And so Bountiful goes all the way to the West Sea. So if you're going from an East Sea to a West Sea, why are you saying the flock are just going towards Zarahemla and not towards Bountiful? But if you go to on this side, then you're going to go, then that's what it's talking about, is they're fleeing towards the land southward, which is called Zarahemla. So that's one textual evidence. The other 2 I have here are Teancum he heads Morianton. So Morianton is a leader if you recall, Captain Moroni built these cities by the East Sea, and you can see why he built those cities by the East Sea. It's to protect the Lamanites from coming across the East Sea. It's a real immediate threat. So they built these cities, but one of them was Morianton, another one was Lehi, and they had a border dispute. And Morianton decides to leave, but before he leaves, he ends up beating a woman who flees over to the camp of Moroni, and he tells them what Morianton's going to do. And they decide they're going to stop him from going to the land northward. So he sends word over to Teancum, who's in Bountiful. And then it says Teancum headed him, but not until he got by the narrow pass, that led into the land northward. So right here. But the most important word is that he headed them. So he's coming around, he's going to be in front of them instead of chasing them or some other way of getting in front of him while he comes up the East Sea. He's coming around and he's heading them. And then the third one I have here is also Mormon and Teancum. And this is after these cities by the East Sea are taken by Ammonihah. So all the way up to Mulek, and Moroni sends word to Teancum, and he says to fortify Bountiful and to secure the narrow pass so that they don't have access to harass on every side. And as you can see, if they had access here, they can harass from this side. And most models just say, well, he's going to go up into the land northward and then come back with people, and that's the harassing. But this is an immediate threat once again that he's saying, okay, don't, secure your land, but don't forget this narrow pass, because that's a way they could come around and attack from this other side and harass you from every side. So there's just a little bit of evidence like that. Just to give you a feel of what the size of the land, it's 165 miles from the bottom to the top of Delmarva and 65 miles across at the widest point. The western shore has a 70 miles from the bottom to the top and 40 miles from in the widest point, which in my approximation gives about 8 to 10,000 square miles. So it's not too big and not too small. It's that Goldilocks again. And then measuring across the bay, we get anywhere from 3 miles to 20 miles. So this should be clear at this point, but the Chesapeake Bay model, if abbreviated CBM here, has East Seas and West Seas. They're not proper names. It's not the East Sea and the West Sea. It's just the sea east to where they're talking about, which means the Chesapeake Bay, which I'm calling that sea that divides the land. It's both an East Sea and a West Sea, depending on where you're standing. So if you're in Bountiful, it's going to be your West Sea. But if you're in Zarahemla, it'll be your East Sea. And when my dad first proposed this other side, that was the one thing that I was like, no, why are you making all these seas? But the more you read it, it actually makes a lot of sense. And it also reinforces this idea that this land is nearly surrounded by water. It says the land of Zarahemla and the land of Nephi are both nearly surrounded by water. And I think this model, more than any other, shows that they're nearly surrounded by water. And this is a picture of the West Sea of Zarahemla, which is the Potomac River. And I want to point this out because sometimes we think Potomac River, we're thinking up by Washington, D.C., where it's more of a river. But as you come down, you get into the tidal portion of the Potomac that has tides and sharks and dolphins and all kinds of things. So it's definitely a sea. And this is a Piscataway chief, a Tayak, and this is his son. It's from a book that I found that I have a few slides in here from that book. This is one of those slides, actually. So this is, again, I liked this because this is from this book. It's a Smithsonian book about the Chesapeake Bay area or the natives, the indigenous people. And they used my land southward. So when I saw this, I was really excited. I'm like, oh, that's exactly my land southward. And they see it as one land. The Piscataway, that picture, Piscataway that I just showed you is here. And this caption, it reads, the Piscataway and Nanacoke. So Nanacoke's right here, close to where the city of Nephi would be. It says they're neighbors, and both tribes are Algonquian and are descendants from the Lenape or Delaware Indians. Okay, so we've heard of the Delaware Indians, in particular because Joseph Smith sent missionaries to the Lamanites, and those Lamanites were in the borders of Missouri, but they were driven there just recently and from Delaware. Like they were the Delaware Indians, and they weren't real receptive at the time because they said, we just got here, come back. The government wouldn't let them back. But interesting that those are the people that Joseph Smith sent for missionaries to the Lamanites. And the Lenape is also known as the grandfather tribe, not just to all these tribes, but to most, if not all, of the Eastern Coast tribes. They believe they descended from the Lenape, who was from this area. Pretty interesting. Okay, so hills are definitely important geographical features that need to be reconciled. There's a big list of them. I'm going to talk about a few of them, especially this one, that's the hill north of Shiloh. And this one's interesting because it doesn't even have a name. All these have names, but this one's just the hill. And when I first started telling people about this model, one thing they said is, it can't be because the Delmarva is too flat. There's no hills. There's no hills. And if you go up high enough, if you go up to the narrow neck, then you're going to see some hills, but there's not enough hills to make sense with it. And I said, well, I just need one on the Delmarva, just one hill. And it took me so many years, but finally, I looked at lots of topography maps, and I finally found an interactive one. This is a screenshot from my phone, and I wrote on this with my finger, so it's hard to read, but it says hill north of Shiloh right here. And then city of Nephi, we know that they always went up to the city of Nephi. And I had already had my map, and this is where I had placed Nephi. And so to find an elevation change where I had already placed the city of Nephi was exciting. But more exciting was finding this hill north of Shiloh. Here's a better picture of that. It's even called Glass Hill. It's a real hill. I have to admit, I probably cried a little bit when I found this because I was so excited. This has been it was searching for so long to find this hill. And So Shiloh would be just south of this, and this is the hill north of Shiloh. It's not even just mentioned once, it's mentioned multiple times. So it's a big deal. It's a hill that's not named because there's not a lot of hills around. We also know that they were able to get up pretty high and see their enemies coming from different lands. And so it makes sense that it was a mostly flat land. But yeah, this was really exciting for me to find that hill. And then over on the western shore, so this is our Sidon, River Sidon. So we're across the Chesapeake Bay now. We're by Zarahemla. There needs to be hills on both the east and west of Sidon. This place that I found right here is where I'm calling the head, and I'll show you in a minute why I'm calling this the head. But this is the Patuxent on this side, and this is the western branch of the Patuxent, and these are both major freshwater rivers that are coming in, and they flow into the sea, into the bay. So this is important because by the head of Sidon, there needs to be hills for armies to hide behind. So we have Lehi's army hiding behind here. We're having some Lamanites coming down, led by a Nephite dissenter, as always. And they're coming, it says they came from the north, and this army is hit on the south. And as they came down, they started attacking. And then the Lamanites started crossing, but Moroni was in a west valley on the other side. So again, here's the head, and then we have a west valley with hills on either side. They probably were over here hiding, and they come out and attack. And then it says that Moroni on this side had armies hidden all the way down to Manti. So there was other places where they could come out, and the ones that were getting by, they would come out and attack. So, and Ripla, Hill Ripla is just on the other side right here. So my hills, I first found the head, and then like, okay, there has to be hills here. And I found hills once again, perfect place. And this is the only place that, well, yeah, that makes the most sense to have a head. And then of course, if we're talking about hills, we got to talk about Hill Cumorah. So this is where it's interesting, because one of the benefits of having this theory, and I showed you at the beginning how it's a straight shot up to that land of many waters where Palmyra is, and of course Hill Cumorah. But I believe there might be two Cumorahs. I'm a two Cumorah person. Doesn't have to be, but I think there's a possible better candidate. This is where being open to like what the Meso people say and the Heartland people say may be beneficial, because you're open. My dad is just like, why do you want to look for another Cumorah? But this was interesting that the Seneca, this is how I came across it. They call themselves the Onondaga, which means hill people. And so I'm like, well, let's look at these hills. And they called this Bear Hill in particular, they called it Genudoa. I think that's how you pronounce it. Modern people call it Bear Hill, and it's just right by Canandaigua Lake, which is one of the Finger Lakes. And the reason I think this is a great candidate is because there was a fort built upon it, covered about an acre, and it was surrounded by a ditch and a formidable wall. This is a quote from C.S. Cleveland, and it's called The History of Yates County. He wrote it in 1873. So post Book of Mormon time, but not too much. So they found this fort that was surrounded, it had like a ditch. This fort was believed to have been built by the Adinas because it has one gate, and a lot of the Hopewell stuff, it had multiple gates. So people believe it was built by the Adinas, but it was added on by the Hopewell. And the Adinas would have been a little bit earlier, more Jaredite time, and Hopewell, Nephite time, there was definitely overlap. But the fact that they're saying a fort was built by these people, added to by these people, makes me think that this is an important hill, and it's still a sacred hill to the Onondaga people. They have ceremonies around Labor Day that they do a bonfire, and it's a sacred place for them. And so, you know, it's I don't even think the battle took place on the hill, but it was a place where they gathered. It said they camped around the hill, and then the Lamanites came upon them. So whether that was where the actual battle was, we know it was in the land of many waters. The traditional hill Cumorah, where Joseph Smith got the plates, is only 20 to 30 miles from this hill. So it's all in the same area. I just think it's interesting that maybe this is a better candidate. It's a bigger hill. It has, you know, significance then and now to Indigenous people. Okay, so last thing about hills is we have these Gadianton robbers that sallied forth out of hills and out of mountains. So now we're getting into mountains. Where we would see mountains, of course, is so here's Zarahemla. This is the Chesapeake Bay, and here's Zarahemla, and north of that is called the Piedmont, and this has lots of hills. And then right north of that is the Blue Ridge Mountains. And so the Gadianton robbers would be in this area. They would sally forth from their hills and their mountains into the land of Zarahemla. So again, this is where the Nephites would be on this side because this is the robbers. Okay, so lands of pure water. We have two references to pure water. The first one is the Waters of Mormon. It had a fountain of pure water. And what I've labeled the Waters of Mormon is this place called Mardella Springs. And I just picked that place because it was a place that people were using, they were bottling water there. So it was a good source of nice, fresh, clean water. And it's not really on this map. Actually, I think it's like right around here by the Nanticoke River. And then Helam would be an 8-day journey up to this freshwater place. So this is the other source, is the land of Helam was in a land of pure water. And so that's like an 8-day journey from down here. Okay, so the last water, I think this is the last water. So we're going to talk a little bit about the River Sidon. I think we've already explained that it's a north-south flowing river. There's cities to the east of Sidon and to the west of Sidon, so it needs to go north-south. The head of Sidon, and this is why I say the Patuxent and the western branch of the Patuxent flow together, is using this definition, the Webster Dictionary one, where it says a confluence or a flowing together, a meeting or junction of two streams of water. So in Joseph Smith's time, as he's translating this, this is a definition of a head. And then they flow together in a short distance because, it flows to the sea in a short distance because it says that bodies were buried into the depths of the sea. And so it can't be like 100 miles to the sea. You know, all rivers flow to the sea, but we're not saying they're washed upon the shore, that they can tell they're going to go out to the sea and they're buried in the depths of the sea. And I'm not the only one that has said it needs to be like a short distance here. And then the Patuxent, yeah, so I already said that part. Okay, and then we talked about hills being on both sides of it. Okay, so I want to read this scripture. This is Nephi. He was seeing this vision of the destruction of his people, and then he has this vision of a man that was separated from his seed of his brethren by the land of many waters, by many waters, and he went forth upon many waters, even unto the seed of my brethren who were in the promised land. And I think a lot, like growing up, and probably you've heard this is talking about Columbus, but Columbus never came to this land. It says he came to the brethren who were in the promised land, and then other people came out of captivity and came. So what's interesting, we have this quote, it says in 1608, Captain John Smith explored the Chesapeake Bay and sailed up the Patuxent River. And remember, the Patuxent River is what I'm calling Sidon. So he sailed up the river Sidon. His claim that heaven and earth never agreed better to frame a place for man's habitation lured many colonists to America. So we have an example of a man that came to the land of promise, that he, then it was his report that drew other people. He actually kept the whole thing going. If it wasn't for him, it would have fallen apart. They would have all died because he took charge, even though he wasn't the official leader. He really, even the indigenous people thought he was the leader. But it says that they lured many English colonists to America, and it says that other Gentiles went forth into out of captivity upon the waters to come to this land. And so here's where John Smith went. Here's my map again. Here's the land southward. He went up the West Sea here, and then came up the coast here and over here. So this was his first voyage, and then he did another voyage where he went up Sidon, came all the way up to Bountiful area. And so he literally was visiting the seed of the Lamanites and was interacting with them, talking with them, making a map. Okay, so here's a picture of what the villages would look like. This is John White's painting. They had these long houses that were 30 to 40 yards long. I kept thinking it was feet, but then I'd read yards. Powhatan, so he was the leader. He had what he called his temple to be, I think, like 50 or 60 yards long. And in Helaman, we learn that their preferred method of building material was actually timber. And so I know, like, a lot of Mesoamerican proponents love the fact that they have these ruins and they have temples, but they're all made of stone. And it says specifically that they used cement in the land northward, but only while they were waiting for their trees to grow back. And they were shipping wood up to the land northward because they said it was for their buildings, and for their temples and synagogues they preferred wood. And so I find that, so this is what a village would look like. We also know that the fortification in the Book of Mormon, they talk about timbers being around the city. So you have these palisades protecting it. Here's another picture by John White, and it's just showing that they were agricultural people. They were growing corn and wheat and peas. And yeah, so and here's their longhouses. And okay, so this is John Smith's map that he made. This is Powhatan. This is in a longhouse. This is Susquehanna indigenous person. So he would be up here is where they, and so they had these really long bows. But here I just want to point out on this map, here's where I have that valley of Alma. So remember, Helam was around here, and it was that water of pure water. And he said they went like a day, and then they hit this valley of Alma. And we have these 3 hills on this map, well, a 4th one over here, but this very well could have been that valley that they were in. And then from there, they went 12 days over to Zarahemla. So I thought that was really cool that they have those hills to have a valley. Just briefly, like some Book of Mormon government, they obviously had kings and secular leaders, they had religious leaders, and they had war chiefs. And this is one of those things I've had feedback from, that even anthropologists have told me that they were hunter-gatherers. They didn't have the population to support the government that the Book of Mormon talks about. But here's John Smith. Here's what he said when he was there. He said, the form of their commonwealth is a monarchical government. One as emperor ruleth over many kings and governors. The chief ruler is called Powhatan and takes his name from the principal place of dwelling called Powhatan, but his proper name is Wahasonakak. So they did have kings that ruled over other kings, and that's exactly what we find in the Book of Mormon, especially with the Lamanite stories. They had kings, but then they had a higher king that king referred to. This again is that book about the boy from the Chesapeake Bay area, and again it just talks about how they had like a head chief, and then they had these councils that were they had a name, Machkomoko, and they advised the Tayak. And then they had these wisos that were holy people that helped in times of peace. And then in times of war, these war chiefs took over. And this would be your chief captains like Moroni, and they took over during times of war. Then we have warwances and warwanoska, which are the female version of warwants. And these are leaders of the town, which are politically linked to another town. So like how we have Manti, but kind of linked to Zarahemla, but they have leaders in those towns too. So definitely not just hunter-gatherer people. They had quite the society. And population, it's interesting that Powhatan, he called the Tidewater, Virginia area Tescomac, which means densely, roughly translated as densely inhabited land. So he felt like the land could support a lot of people in his mind. And they also, we also have to remember that they were gathering people during times of war from the land northward. And Mormon came down with his dad from the land northward during a war. So people came from the land northward when there was a big war. And the final war, we had 230 approximately Nephites die, which is not an unreasonable thing, because at that point they were gathering all the people from the land northward that would side with them. And then we talked already a little bit about agriculture, that they grew corn, wheat, beans, and peas. And this is important because we had bread when Jesus came. And John Smith, he talks about first, like the natives, they were given him bread, and then at one point he was stealing bread from them. So there was bread being produced. We also have little barley, which is the Hordeum Pelusium, we find this in other places in North America, but it's definitely grown in this particular area. And we needed this for the law of Moses to offer that wave offering. And that sets your time, because otherwise your seasons would get out of order if you don't have, it's after the barley ripens, then you can start the new year. So that's an important part of the law of Moses. And then John Smith talks about this top thing right here is a quote from John Smith. It said, in every territory of a war once, so that was the leader of a certain village or town, is a temple and a priest or two or three. And so the Powhatan had at least 3 temples, and they were, like I said earlier, I think 60 yards in length. They were huge, massive. And only the priest and the king were allowed inside. And this is John Smith's perspective, but he said common people were afraid of the temples. They would throw things and they would stay away. They also had stone altars called pakrances, and these weren't at the temples themselves. They were usually in the village or in the wilderness area, but they were offering blood. They were burning deer suet and tobacco on these altars. So it's interesting, the Lamanites that were left over were not followers of Christ, and they possibly could have gone back to some of the traditions with the law of Moses, and they were offering these sacrifices on these altars. Okay, so getting to the end here, this is the archaeology. So I've shown these details that are reconciled. Let's talk about what they're finding in terms of archaeology. So in 2004, they discovered at this place called Pig Point, and where this is, I should have had a map for this, but it is just right above my head of Sidon on the east side. So it's kind of where I have maybe the Valley of Gideon, but they found, they were excavating to put in some utilities, and they dug down and they found the site that they thought was interesting. And so they started an excavation in 2009, and they excavated for 5 years. And as of 2016, they had over 700,000 artifacts. And these are just a couple of quotes from 2 articles, the New York Times and the Capital Gazette. And I'm just going to read this. It says, the new pit also yielded the first Ohio Valley flints and pipes at the dig. Some items were unlike any seen so far, including Adena blades as long as 10 inches and tiny copper beads. Carbon dating revealed that the site had been continuously used for at least half a millennium, from 2030 BC to about 300 AD. And so if you recall, like 230 is when Mosiah came over to Zarahemla. And then right after 300, you start to get the wars, and the Nephites are pushed up. So these are the 2 main places where things change. So a lot of Nephites come in, a lot of Nephites are going out into the land northward. They're all wiped out, and even the Lamanites are fighting at the end. So this doesn't get as populated after this time period. They were in the land northward for a while, and then had 50 years of peace before they did their final battle. So the timeline really matches up right there. And then this article says, the biggest surprise has been the wide distribution of artifacts. It's everywhere. The archaeology team approach begins with digging a shovel test pit a couple of feet deep that are set up in grids across a potential study area. The promising sites will have a cluster of shovel pits with some artifacts and other evidence on spots scattered across the grid. Not this site. We dug 450 test pits over a quarter mile, and nearly every one of them had an artifact. So it's showing how well used this was during this Book of Mormon time. Okay, so I'm done. So this is my conclusion. I think the study of Book of Mormon really does improve our comprehension of the Book of Mormon. I found so many things make more sense. I studied the Book of Mormon more because I was interested in geography. So it's been a really good experience in my life. I think the Chesapeake Bay model does reconcile all those details, those geographical references, and just knowing where it takes place, it helps us know who these people were, and we can connect with them. Even though they're in a different time, we can connect throughout time, and not just in this time, but throughout time. And of course, it just makes the narrative come alive. So that's what I have. I just want to thank my brother's the one that first pointed out when I was getting into geography, the Delmarva, that I should look at it. And my dad's the one that came up with the idea of using the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay. And he had no idea about the fall line or any of that. He just was looking for a riverside that was going the right direction. And then everything else just kind of started falling into place. And then I also want to thank Asias at Hall Labs for helping me make my maps. And of course, Deb and Paul and Robert and all of you for inviting me here. And I will open it back up to you guys for comments. Stop my share.
Thank you, Laura. It's delightful to have your enthusiasm and the opportunity to be exposed to a whole new perspective on it. I do have, I'm sure everybody will have some questions for you, but I get the privilege as host to ask the first one. And let me begin with the question about writing. It would appear that the Book of Mormon indicates that we have to have cultures that have writing, and what evidence do you come up with for writing in the Chesapeake area during that time period?
Yeah, so I was reading a paper from this guy that studies Mesoamerica, and he had a comment, and I don't even know the guy that made the comment, but he said he was getting back into geography, he was looking at the Jaredites, and he said this is the closest that we have to the Anton letters, except for a tattoo on a Delaware Indian's forehead. So I don't know what that tattoo looked like. I asked him to give me a picture, and he never responded. But so there's we know it's more here. It's like it's changed over time, but we know that there's like it's not an advanced writing. It's a very hieroglyphic. That's the word I was trying to look for. Writing. And so I think we do see evidence. We just don't know we have evidence. We know that the Lamanites were destroying records if they got a hold of them. And it only takes a generation or two to lose languages. They change, the language changes. And if you're not, even in the Book of Mormon, they would say things like, we had, when Mosiah came over to Sarah Hamlet, they had already lost their language and they had to teach them how to write. And so we don't have records, we don't have what Mesoamerica people have, but it makes sense that we would lose that fast. And it's probably in plain sight on rocks and things that we're not recognizing. That's
Laura, can you hear me?
I can hear you, John.
Listen, I appreciate all the time you've done to put this together. I didn't catch at the beginning, and I have lots of questions, but did you put this whole proposed area together? Who was that to put that together? Was that you?
It was me and my dad. So my brother picked out the main Delmarva, but my dad and I kind of went back and forth, and we would compare maps, and a lot of the times we'd have our cities at the exact same place, which was really fun. It was a good experience for us to talk about the text. But yeah, just us two. So
what made you think of that area?
Just my brother. So I was just looking in general. I was looking at Mesoamerica, and my dad had just a few weeks before, he's like, check out the Heartland theory. I think this is interesting. And then my brother just looked at a map and he said, what about this area right here? The Delmarva Peninsula. He's like, that has a narrow neck. Again, it's people looking for that narrow neck. And so he found that narrow neck, and then it just went from there.
I'm sure you're familiar with other proposed areas, aren't you? I know you're familiar with them. When you say artifacts, when they discover artifacts, does that mean bones also?
Yeah, actually lots of bones in particular in that area. They thought it was a burial site. There was circular places where they were burying lots of people. And there, so yeah, lots and lots of bones.
I'm excited. When I teach the Book of Mormon, I don't emphasize where it takes place. My emphasis is on the meaning of the Book of Mormon, and I hope people don't lose that.
For sure.
The real meaning of the Book of Mormon. Are you a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I am too.
Okay.
Notice that she mentioned early on that the purpose of the book was to unify.
Yes.
I would like for you to expand on that, if you would, please, because I think I generally agree with that, but how do you support it, and what particular statements in the book make it so that you come to that conclusion?
Well, just Third Nephi is the perfect example. They had the perfect society because they had all things in common, and they weren't comparing, or they weren't saying I'm right, you're wrong. And I'm trying to remember the exact scripture where it says no contention among them, or if you're, maybe someone can help me out. If you have contention, then maybe I should Google that real fast. But yeah, so the perfect society was only shown when Christ came and he taught him the perfect order of having all things in common, and not having that division where I'm better than you or you're better than me. And I think sometimes we get, it's just so crazy that even in Book of Mormon geography, we still have that human tendency to think I'm right, therefore you must be wrong, and I'm going to defend my part, even if you have some good points, I'm just going to defend it because I want to defend to be right. And we're missing out on learning from each other and all that great stuff that comes from not having that contention.
I like that because I've been interpreting the fundamental purpose of the book to be to teach peace, where you say unity.
Yeah.
Strong parallel or commonality across there. Let me encourage people to react, to raise your hands, and we probably have we have Deb acting as mentor, monitor to try to keep us in order and keep us in line. But it's rather exciting new glimpse for most of us, I think, to consider such a geographical location. But yeah, just to fundamentally agree on the purpose, teach peace. As I see it, you have the whole book as a commentary on the dysfunctional human family
Mm-hmm.
getting along very well, and ultimately when they learn the messages of Christ, they can learn to live together in peace, and that message is still before us. And as we look to the promised land of Zion, we are simply following the quest for the promised land that we've seen in dozens of other pursuits. And so I think I find this interesting commonality. But now then, let's allow people to go ahead with their questions and comments.
Is there do you don't have a book published on this, on your findings, do you?
Nope. You want to help me write one?
Would I be able to find things on the internet on it?
So I do have a blog that I started. My dad actually passed away in January, so I started a blog when I knew he was going downhill. And I also have a website that I'm trying to get more stuff on there. So more will be coming soon.
That's great.
The blog is just bomland.blogspot.com. It was just I was just trying to get it out there. And then the website's going to be allthingsbearrecord.com, because it has some of his other works with
Say that again.
Can you type that in the chat? Laura?
yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Say that again.
It's BOM land, BOM like Book of
Mormon.
BOM.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting it.
Chat. Can you get to the chat? I'm just going to write it in the chat.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, other people aren't raising their hands, and so I will. I'm intrigued that so much of your information is much later than the Book of Mormon period. The observations about the Delaware, the Lenape people. I presume that you're suggesting Lenape people are descended directly from the Nephites then?
Yeah. Yeah. And Lamanites. Yeah. So Lenape, Lamanites, like they're.
And any place names that you can find that correspond?
So for Lenape being the grandfather tribe, or what's your question?
Any Book of Mormon place names? You put a bunch of sites marked on the map where you think they were.
Mm-hmm.
In Mesoamerica, there's at least one. The site of Lamani would appear to correspond with Lamoni. Anything like that in the Chesapeake?
Yeah, so they have Manti, but they have like Manaponi. Like it's close, but remember how fast languages change. And even the Nanacoke are right next to the Nephi. So it has like the first letter. There's not like anywhere that I can say exactly this is. I'm not a linguist. Linguist? Is that the right word? So I don't think there's anything like that, but I think there's, at least they have the same syllables. And I also want to point out, if you look back at that hill, it ends with an ah. So it had, the Jaredites called it Ramah. Nephites called it Camorah, and then they called it Janogoah. Like it all ended in the same, but it changes over time quite frequently. I mean, I'm getting to a preteen and I can't understand what he's saying half the time. So I know how fast languages change. And if we're saying, if they didn't have a written language, their towns are going to change significantly over 2,000 years. So it's not surprising that we don't have something that lines up, but we still have an N and an M, and some of the syllables match up, but not an exact name, for sure not.
Okay. Val has his hand up. Go ahead, please, Val.
Well, you just declared yourself not to be a linguist, so
No.
this question, you might not want to address it, but the Shenandoah sounds a lot like the place where I live and work right now, the Shenandoah Valley, which is nearby. I don't know if there's any connection there, but the main question I wanted to ask about was, have you looked at all at the geological dimensions of it, in that you have all that destruction in 3rd Nephi? Have you got any way of matching up with that? Because it isn't a very volcanically active area, and like Mesoamerica, they have the volcanoes, which helps them with the destruction at the time of Christ coming.
Yeah, so if you read 3rd Nephi, I wish I had a slide. I'm trying to see. It says that there was this intense storm that had lots of lightning and thunder. We have lands that were changed, that were broken up. There was rumblings for about 3 hours. I'm trying to find something here. But if you really read it, and then there was like places sunk into the water. There was a lot of water, so there was places that the water was rising up. But there's a storm. I was trying to find the name just barely, but it's like a supercell storm that the average lasts between 2 to 4 hours. It can last up to 7 hours. But in these storms, we have severe lightning. You have tornadoes, and that's what it talks about in the Book of Mormon, that it created these tornadoes. And I thought that it was interesting that the average storm length for these is 2 to 4, and then the Book of Mormon says that it lasted 3 hours. So it's right at that average. I think that there was a lot of flooding, and lightning. There was cities catching fire from the lightning, but then there was also a lot of flooding that would cause mudslides. We know, I think we've seen enough flooding recently that we know what the damage water can do, how powerful that is, and that it's going to make low places high and high places low really fast. And I've seen, modern roads being broken up by flooding and water. So I really think we don't need a volcano in this area. There was 3 days of darkness after, which we see if this place is made of wood, we're going to have, and we know Zarahemla was on fire, multiple cities were on fire. You're going to have a darkness. And in California, after their fires, I was reading about the people there saying they wanted to go back to bed because it felt like it was nighttime. Like it just had this like heavy, dark feeling for days. And so if you're going to have fires, you're going to have that darkness, and then all the rest fit this storm pretty good, in my opinion. So I don't think
what is the average elevation of these places? I ask because it seems like tsunamis might be an issue too.
Yeah, they're just right at the sea level. There's not a lot of elevation. They have hills over by Zarahemla more, but like 100, 150 feet, I think, is what we're looking at for hills. As you go up closer to the Piedmont, then you're gonna hit higher elevations, but in the majority of that land southward, it's pretty sea level. So yeah, because we did have at least 2 cities sunk by the sea, and so if we're gonna have a storm and then things sinking these cities, that makes sense because you're right by that bay.
Since you're speaking of, I'm sorry, Val, were you done?
Just going to say, I think we typically pronounce that Piedmont. The Piedmont.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Piedmont. That's what you tell me.
a lot. You might want to say
Piedmont. Thank you.
Anyway, since we're kind of talking climate and elevation and stuff, that Delaware and that area, Maryland, they have 4 seasons there, probably a lot
Yeah.
of winter, don't they?
Yep, they have 4 seasons.
I'm just kind of curious as I've read the Book of Mormon many, many times. And I don't remember any reference at all about cold or winter or snow or anything. Does that interest you at all?
Well, we also know Moroni kept saying I can only write 100th part of my history. So we do know that John Smith, when he came, they were in loincloths. Very typical of them to like have really low clothes or not clothes at all, which is what's described in the Book of Mormon. It doesn't talk a lot about their weather, except for 3rd Nephi. So I wouldn't expect him to say, and it snowed. They did have seasons. They said like they would have illnesses in certain seasons, and which makes sense because you get mosquitoes and different things at different seasons. So they definitely had seasons. What those seasons were isn't defined. And so you can say it's a rainy season and not rainy season, or you can say there was a cold season and a warmer season. So just a lack of evidence isn't evidence. So just because it doesn't say snow doesn't mean it never snowed there. They couldn't write very much.
Paul? Is that are you Paul? Are you Paul? Paul
I am,
Paul DeBarth?
yes,
Okay, I'm new to this group here. Are you the leader of the group here?
no, I'm merely the host.
Oh, you're the host. Oh, so there's a different host every week?
No, I've been hosting for the last 2 years and a half.
Oh, okay, so there's no real leader or anything, you're just hosting.
He's
I-
our
I'm
fearless
just-
leader.
I'm just trying to figure out how all this works and all.
Paul's our leader.
And who, okay, and who picks who talks and all that kind of stuff? I don't know, I'm kind of curious. Maybe you can give me your email or whatever.
I think I hear you volunteering to give a presentation.
Say that again?
I think I hear you volunteering to present.
I
What topic would you like to present?
I still didn't understand you, I'm sorry.
I'm curious what topic you would present to us.
Oh, you want me to give you some topics? Is
He
that what
wants
you're
you to
saying?
present.
I think you're volunteering to make a presentation, and so I try to get the presentations lined up according to topic.
Uh.
You're welcome to think about it and send me an email to.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I have access to your email.
Yes,
Are you a member of the church, the Community of Christ?
I am a member of the Community of Christ. Yes,
Okay. All right, what area? Is it the Brush Creek area?
I live in Kansas,
Okay,
although
All right.
I'm an archaeologist at the Joseph Smith Historic Sites in Nauvoo.
okay.
So,
I'll shut up.
No, you don't have to shut up. But the appropriate course is to go down to the reactions button and raise your hand. Notice Val did that, and the idea of having people raise their hand. Typically, we'll have 3 or 4 or 5 people raise their hands to be in line to ask questions and make comments. And tonight, we've just been the 3 of us so far, or maybe more. But let's use that, because that way Deb Luce is looking to see who wants to speak next, and people who do not have access to the button and wave their hands and want to get in still can that way. So we call on her to be our coordinator. So in a real sense, she is our leader. And tonight, since she is the one that made contact with Laura, then she's really the leader. And I'm not that fond of hierarchy. I much prefer the equity of all of us being equitably treated and therefore equitably named. So I duck when you call me a leader. I would claim to be the lead archaeologist for the Joseph Smith Historic Sites.
Okay, Dale, you have a question? Go ahead and unmute, please.
Well, number one, I'm from Brush Creek area, and I was wondering why or how you happen to know about Brush Creek.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Because I just moved here in 2018. And I live in Sparta, Illinois.
Oh, okay. Well,
Were
I've
you
went to Brush Creek since 1954. And of course, Brush Creek Church was organized in December of 1842 and has continued on. And the campgrounds there. So I just wondered how you knew about Brush Creek.
But you're not from Brush Creek?
I'm 25 miles from Brush Creek.
Oh, did you attend the reunion this year?
Yes, not all the week, but I have attended many reunions.
Did I meet you? Did you attend my Book of Mormon class?
No, that was not me.
Oh, okay. I'm excited about the Book of Mormon, and I really want people to know about the real meaning behind the Book of Mormon. And I appreciate all the work that people do to get people interested in it. Like Laura, I mean, some people, they want to know if it's real or not. I don't think that's important, but some people, they want to know if it's real, and then it means something to them. So I appreciate all the work that's done to get anybody interested in the Book of Mormon.
I'm a Book of Mormon convert. I'm
Are
one
you?
of those that I came in contact with the church through meeting my wife our senior year. And I was the one, based on hearsay, that wouldn't go in the church. And I wouldn't go in the church with her during the years of our dating. I don't know how she put up with me. I can't believe any other young lady would, but she did. So anyway, the very book that I ignorantly persecuted converted me to the church.
When I introduced it to my son, he threw it in the trash can.
Okay. Val, go ahead, please.
Laura, have you been in discussions much with the people that hold to the other theories, and what kind of reactions have you had, if so, from them?
So I am in a Facebook group, both two separate Facebook groups. One's a Heartland one and one's a Mesoamerican one. I'm also in a South American one, but there's not a lot of activity in that one. The Meso people, I've mentioned it to a few times, and that's where I started. That's why I have the slide on archaeology, or on the populations and stuff, because my feedback was dismissive because they were hunter-gatherers. They didn't have the population to support the kings and all that. That's pretty much the only feedback I had. They're quick to dismiss it. I mostly just kind of have a conversation on what I like and ask questions about theirs, instead of, I don't think I've even presented a map yet, because I haven't had a map that I've been proud of to share. I've just had someone reach out to me that's helping me make maps, because I'm a one-person show here. So I have mentioned the Delmarva, and that was the biggest reaction is, oh, the population doesn't fit, and there was no kings, and that just doesn't work. I don't think I've ever talked about that in the Heartland, because I don't think the Heartland would have as much issue with my theory, because it's in the Heartland. But yeah, it's mostly been Mesoamerican, and I really enjoy the conversations there. They're super fun. There's one or two people that get really passionate and have that contention, but most people are so open, and it's been, even when we disagree, it's a good conversation. We enjoy each other's company. So
What would you say they were raising with respect to your theory, the question of populations? What are the comparative advantages of your theory? Do you think your theory has strengths that the alternative theories lack?
Really, like I said at the beginning, I've looked at the details of it, and I don't see any other theories that go to those details and say, this is where these hills are, this is why it is the hill north of Shiloh. They're more general. I feel like my theory, we're like getting to the nitty gritty, and we show that this fits the narrative so perfectly. Let's see, what else do I think? I mean, just that land northward, land southward, people just draw a line on the map, but I have this actual line that people, I've read a blog once that somebody was hiking from above the fall line and they knew exactly when they were below the fall line because it was so different. And so both the Jaredites and the Nephites, it wasn't just the Nephites decide on this line, but the Jaredites also said that they saved the land southward for game and, you know, as a preserve. So they also delineated this line, and there was something about it. And so I have a fall line that fits that narrative.
So your comparative advantage, you feel, is mostly that you're able to map onto the details of location, the fountains of pure water, the line and everything more fully.
Precisely.
Because of the other theories.
Yeah, and I also, just the fact that the Lenape were the grandfather tribe and they're from that area, I think supports that there's something about this land. Again, like John Smith coming to this land, all these things add up in my mind to support that this is a possible location.
The John Smith point is actually really innovative.
The which part? The John Smith?
It's very
that's a big
innovative.
thing with Heartland. People, you know, come and say, well, Columbus never came to North America. How do you define that? So
Actually quite a, oh, did the Heartland people talk about John Smith too?
no, I don't think anyone has besides me. I just a few years ago made that connection. So
It fits your theory better than any other.
it fits my theory, yeah. And that nearly surrounded by water, I think fits. I don't see any other models where you can say the land of Zarahemla and the land of Nephi are nearly surrounded by water from the ground. Like people look at maps and they can say, well, there's water here and there's water there, but how would you view this on the ground as a Nephite or as a Lamanite? What does it look like?
I can't help but think of all of the possibilities where this landing could have taken place and where Lehi and his family landed, the Jaredites and the Mulekites. There has to be something spiritual here that took place, maybe in your brother's mind or your mind, that made you take on this adventure. Can you deny the spirit in this at all?
Oh, I cannot deny the spirit in this. And I've had so many spiritual experiences as I studied. You know, geography was a catalyst that got me studying the Book of Mormon, because I had to read it over and over again to look at my map. And I learned these stories about grace and all these other amazing things. So definitely the spirit has had an influence. I'm not going to say the spirit said this is the true land, therefore it's true, but I have personally been guided into finding these things that and have felt pretty excited about. Yeah, for sure, the spirits accompanied me in my journey.
Cool. Okay, Paul, and then
well,
Ron.
You don't mind, right? Am I talking too much?
Yeah, raise your hand.
Do you think that somehow, you know, this being the last dispensation and, you know, we really don't know how close or how far away it might be. There's still a lot of things that, in my mind, need to take place, like the 10 tribes of their books and things being revealed and stuff. But do you think maybe that it is important that we know exactly where they land before the coming of Christ? Is that important, you think? Do you think it's that this is maybe relevant to the coming of Christ, maybe?
Well, as I said before, I feel like knowing where it took place helps us know who they are, not just then, but who the descendants are. And I personally joined some Facebook groups of like the Mattaponi and different people. Just I know I don't comment, I don't say anything about my theory. I just watch, and I've fallen in love with these people, whether it's the land or not. I've felt closer to them. A lot of them are Baptist, they're Christian. They've accepted Christ as their Messiah, which I find interesting. But and they also, the other thing that really impresses me is this connection they have to their ancestors, which I do too. I want to be connected throughout time, not just now. And so I do think that, what was your question now? I'm getting a little off, I think. But knowing who they are I feel is important. And I don't know what will come of it.
My question was, do you think this discovery that you've come up to, which you think is somewhat spiritual, has anything to do with maybe in this last dispensation that we're getting really close, that it may be really important that we do know where it took place?
That's hard to say. I don't want to take on that role, so I'm just gonna say what the data I found is, and if it leads someone to reading the Book of Mormon, we'll go from there. But I don't know what God's plan is with this. I just know that it's been exciting and interesting in my life, and in particular to know who these people are, both then and now.
Thank you, Laura and John. Paul, go ahead, please, and then Ron.
Okay, and John, notice, please, two of us with our hands up means if you would go find that reactions button, you can get in line for your next question. I want to call Laura's attention to a previous presentation that we had by Josh Gailey of the Monongahela group. That's the Sidney Rigdon Bickertonite organization. Josh has archaeological background, and he put together a map to show what the Book of Mormon lands look like. And one of the points that he emphasized is that because so much of the mileage is walking, that it has to be a comparatively small zone.
Yeah.
What you have presented in the respect that it is a small zone. It is small enough to fit the Book of Mormon parameters, I believe, and I appreciate that element, because I think that that's one of the strengths that you can offer when people like Val ask you to identify the strength of your position.
Good point. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, I feel like it's a Goldilocks, because it has to be long enough that you can get a few days out of it, but short enough where all this can happen, for sure.
and your I like your division of the sea east, sea west, and having been to Chesapeake and seen how basically flat that territory is.
Yeah.
I am curious if you have any evidence of underwater cities being discovered archaeologically.
I don't know about cities exactly, but they are archaeologists. I've read articles. They're saying they're worried that they're going to lose. There are, things just right off of the bay. They're finding things that is getting washed into the sea. So it's definitely changed. It's rising. So I believe very easily there could have been cities that sunk right in that area, and they have found they have done scuba dives and have found things in the water itself. So that there's definitely stuff there, whether we can say it was a full city or not. I think we could, but we'll leave that to the archaeologists and the scuba divers. So definitely evidence down there, but they're worried about it going away, because it's rising so fast and things are getting washed away. They've already said that they've lost a lot of things that were there 20, 30 years ago. So
Let me also ask, though, if I may, because you emphasize the Sidon having a north-south flow, but I recall the Book of Mormon indicating that it flowed north.
yeah, so the reason people say that is because it flows by Zarahemla, which is north of Manti, but they always cross the head to get to Manti. And so they say, well, if the head is the beginning of the river, then it must flow from south to north. But I get away with that by saying a head is where these two rivers collide, and that's the definition of head. And so it goes by Zarahemla, but where they're crossing at the head is down by Manti. So it can go north to south.
Okay, I yield to Ron then.
Okay, thanks. Ron, go ahead, please.
Well, I think this is at least at first mostly with John, the man with Mickey Mouse on his shirt. Mickey Mouse is a pretty important person in the life of the world, but that's not what I really wanted to say.
Thank you.
This what you're seeing here tonight would none of this would be here if it wasn't for Paul DeBarth. So he may not want to claim being the leader. I think it says maybe he's being awful humble tonight. But he's the guy that brings all this together, and we really have I suppose summertime, people are on vacation. There's only 26 that showed up tonight. Not unusual for it to be 40 and upwards close to 50 people that show up here. and doesn't make any difference with whether you're LDS, RLDS, COC, some restored variation. Doesn't make any difference. We all get along. Hardly ever a bad word ever said. So even sometimes when it makes you kind of want to chuckle about what the person might be saying about the Book of Mormon, but nobody gets mad. It's a absolutely amazing group. And if it wasn't for Paul, we wouldn't be here.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ron, for your nice words.
Well,
Appreciate it.
Okay, well,
well, I couldn't sit still.
thank you, Ron. John, the fact that I've been working as the archaeologist at the Joseph Smith Historic Sites, and in the archaeology, we work with volunteers. And we've had volunteers from across the restoration spectrum. And every summer to have the volunteers working together, eating together, digging up our history together, trying to interpret it and figure out what it means, has been just a taste of Zion. So when COVID occurred and we couldn't dig, I missed that taste of Zion and determined to set up the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum as a substitute to provide an opportunity for people who have that common belief or even common interest to be able to share and hopefully share amicably so that we could gather more information. I came 2 weeks ago off of a teaching chess and thinking skills, and my presentation last week was on the thinking skills. Highlight that we need to learn more moves ahead. In chess, if you don't think of a few moves ahead, then you're going to get beat pretty fast. In life, I think we need to learn to make a few moves ahead. And so one of the best ways to do that is to be able to pick up additional perspectives so that we can see what those other possibilities are. And so to be able to have the perspectives as the fourth mode of thinking means that I'm trying to encourage people's education, and as a career teacher, that's important. So I prefer to be the guide from the side rather than the lead standing in the nosebleed section. So that's why I'm sort of ducking when it comes to being called a leader. I'm merely the host, and I am so pleased and blessed to have all of you participate and want to come back and share, many of you, Monday after Monday. And people like Ron Edwards coming up with nice compliments for all kinds of crazy presentations. It's just so much fun. And there's every presentation we've had has had benefit to share. And so again, Laura, thank you for
Bravo, Laura.
Thank
Bravo.
you. Thank you.
Paul. Oh,
yeah,
Paul, before we go, can I make sure I got your email address? Is it PALDEBARTHE something?
so it's debarthp@gmail.com.
Can you put that in the chat window? I'm sorry. I'm really new at this. I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Yeah, well, Val has his hand up, and so I'd like to get that honored.
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I can't understand you and all that good stuff. It's my problem because I got a hearing problem. So I'm sorry. But anyway, Laura, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Paul,
Well-
did you say your email is debarthp@gmail.com?
Yes,
Oh, is it pauldebirth@gmail.com?
I put it in the chats.
Oh, there it is.
Okay,
Gotcha. Thank you.
Well,
Val, go ahead.
oh,
Oh,
hang on. Well, okay, Val, go ahead.
Ron, it's all right. Jump in. If you had something to say, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm surprised, someone hasn't brought up about the man that, presented here one Monday night, where he took every line in the Book of Mormon, and if it said anything about the land, or the water, he put that into a computer, and then he let the computer come up with maps on where that would take place in the world. And if my memory was better, I could maybe say more about that. I'm kind of anxious to go back and pull that up and see how it compares. But I'll say this, what Laura has presented here this evening has been just incredible. And to think that she
Here, here.
did that, I don't know how much computer she used, but the other man pulled out all the forces of a computer. And I think Laura has, oh my, it's so interesting, so believable. So it's, and it's too bad that Laura, that you don't have a book on this. I think you would have sold a bunch of them tonight.
Oh, I don't want to make money off of this, though. That would be horrible.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the way a lot of us on this program operate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I do know who you're talking about, and I've looked at his thing, and the only problem with his algorithms is he has, and I've talked to other programs, my map maker in particular, I talked about it with him, and it's the parameters you put on the thing make it kind of biased to one model or another. And so I've gone through every line just manually and read, following my map. I pulled out, I have like, I think it's like 70 pages in a Word document of all the references, listed by cities and all the references that it talks about that city, and used my map. So I've done this all by hand. But yeah, computer programmers have all said it's those parameters you're putting on it will skew your results. So you got to be careful. Just because it's in a computer, it doesn't make it 100% right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's all I had.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you.
Okay, Val, go ahead, please.
So I think it makes a lot of difference whether people think the Book of Mormon really happened or not, in
Sure.
how much they engage with it. So do you think that coming up with another theory about where it was located, is that helpful in helping people to think it's real? Or I'm just wondering about the apologetic value of the different theories.
Yeah.
Does this help us hold to the reality of the Book of Mormon, the historicity of the Book of Mormon? It certainly would if we locked into one and it just became more and more compelling. But we have now a lot of theories, like Malaysia is a theory. There's an African theory. Yours is a really interesting one, and as you say, it has certain strengths that some of the others don't. I'm just wondering a little bit about what you think about the apologetic value of these different theories.
So I think if you're going to propose a new area, it gets people back into the Book of Mormon, either to prove you wrong, they have to get in there and actually read the text. So I'm all for that. Find another theory and get people talking about it. So I think it's a good thing.
You're certainly right that we can't go wrong by reading the Book of Mormon closely.
Yeah, it's been a huge benefit in my life, reading it over and over again. But really good point. Thanks, Val.
I came into this forum with a pretty strong predisposition toward the Mesoamerican view, because I had studied it the most, and I was able to make the most strong connections. And I still fundamentally hold it to be largely sound. However, or I have been exposed to the other views, and particularly the Malay view, that one is surprising in the effectiveness of identifying the animals and the plants. Just about everything works there, as well as a number of the place names. So that one is just most intriguing. And And so the more I look, the more I find myself in a little bit of disagreement with Val. I'm not sure it has to have a singular historicity. I think it may very well be allegorical and written in such a manner that it can be true for all humankind, just like the gospel.
Yeah, whatever it takes to get people to connect to it, I think is powerful for sure.
Again, I would go back to your comment about advocating unity, and where I have been advocating that it advocates for peace, to appreciate that parallel is sufficiently strong to make it valuable to represent. My brother called me on the fact that I was using the term Zion too much. While it works well enough across the spectrum of the restoration, it doesn't fit very well when you're looking at modern Israel and Palestine. And so to be able to substitute Newtopia was my first effort, and nobody seems to get very excited about my Newtopia. But to recognize that there's a major movement working toward compassion in our world, compassion, businesses, schools, compassion as a theme for the churches. Here again is another of those elements by which I see the dysfunctional family of humanity having chances to learn the teachings of the Christ, and therefore be able to learn to live in unity and peace. However, I'm a little bit concerned about unity because I find myself dealing with an awful lot of disagreement, disparities. We have so many differences that we like. It's awfully tough to bridge those to a unity. And so how we do that is, well, I think the way we do that is what we're doing here on the forum. We simply address each other with patience and some affability.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I agree. I think we have more in common than not in common, but we focus on the things that are not in common. And if we would just listen to each other, we would see that we have the same things that we want out of life. All humanity wants the same things if we would just listen to each other. Sometimes we just have these extremes that we focus on. So thank you so much, Paul. Love your comments.
So Laura, what do you see your future so far as your theory? Are you going to be continuing, or are you satisfied with where you are, or still working on it?
I'm really happy with where I have things mapped out. I think going forward, I just want to fine tune my map. Now that I have someone helping me with my map, we're going to get those cities in the right positions, and then just put this on my website for people to look at and hopefully read the Book of Mormon. That's my goal in life, is to get people interested. There's not a lot of people that want to engage in it. So if I can put these ideas out there for them to say, well, does it fit, and have them look at the Book of Mormon, then I'm happy with that.
Go ahead and publish a book. You don't have to worry about making money on it.
Yeah, if you can help me write a book. I'm not a great author. Yeah, most books don't make money, so I shouldn't worry about that, right?
It won't make money.
No.
So this date tonight may go out in history. Is this one of the first times you presented your theory?
I've been on a podcast before, and then yeah, this is probably my second public appearance.
We're witnessing history, everybody.
Just yeah.
Enjoying it.
Just remember us when you get famous.
Don't get me famous. I don't want to be famous. Just look at the website. We're happy with that.
You got to take care of your
Thank
kids,
you, though.
right?
You're so kind.
You're
Yeah,
already-
I'm in that stage of life where I've got the kids I need to focus on.
You are already the John Sorensen of the Delmarva Peninsula.
There you go. The Laura Hathaway of the Delmarva.
I have to acknowledge that I was a bit skeptical when Deb suggested your presentation. And I had a friend who suggested that Highway 95 is the narrow neck.
Mm.
But he lives in that area, and so the narrow neck for him is a modern constriction.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, just very interesting though that your presentation meets the standards of what we expect here for people to be able to share something that's interesting, well researched, and gives us a chance to expand our perceptions about the book.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
A number of our people that commonly would be making comments have not yet, and I don't want to cut things off prematurely. But time to raise your hand and get your comment or your question in. If not, then good night. The Lord is watching over you. Good night. His blessings go before you. Good night, and we'll be praying for you. So good night. May God bless you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. You'll see my sweetheart